Our intention today is to be present, playful, and reflective.
Hey, it's Bobby. Welcome to Student of Intention, where we help you enjoy the pursuit of purpose. Remember, don't wait, start small, learn as you go. That was my guest and friend, longtime confidant, Chelsea Bosley. And I know that giving that intention was probably a little challenging because we just had a little laugh fest, didn't we?
Yes, we did.
So we tried something new. We played the intro right before this show. And I think Chelsea just hearing that intro and hearing me speak those words just got us a little giggly.
It did. It was nice to hear your voice and Bobby podcast voice.
You got it. Well, we'll do a little bit more introduction here on Chelsea in a second, but I want to quickly talk about the shift in season 2, because last episode Chris and I capped season 1. Season 1 was my first time doing a podcast, my first time speaking about these ideas of living with intention in this format. And it was exploratory. We invited guests who, sort of shared their own stories of living with intention. And one common question we asked everyone was, what is something they want to metabolize? And that season was an awesome experience. It's only added to all the different facets of my journey of living with intention. In so many ways, it's helped, bring more insights and perspective to my newsletter, to my book, and expanded my relationships, which is something we're going to talk about more today. But before we do, we're shifting into season 2. And in season 2, we're going to do a different format. And what we're going to focus on is exploring the framework that served as the catalyst for my journey into this world of Student of Intention. Without this framework, this podcast, the newsletter, and the Student of Intention community wouldn't exist. That framework is called the 5 buckets. The book by the same name is due out in a couple weeks, pending any last minute publisher troubles. And so we'll talk more about that. But that framework came to me in September at a men's retreat where during a meditation ceremony, I thought about 5 important areas of my life that I wanted to practice naming intentions and reflecting on each week, which I did. And after several weeks, I learned so much about myself, the experience, and the practice that I decided to write a book about it, the book that I just mentioned. And so the other part of exploring this framework is we're going to explore it through the eyes of the Student of Intention community. And that community is pretty small. It's pretty intimate right now, but we've been hard at work over the last several weeks trying to figure out how others are enjoying their pursuit of purpose. And one such person is Chelsea Bosley. So I mentioned at the top of the show, Chelsea is a longtime friend. She's actually one of the best friends to my wife, Tracy Lim. Tracy Lim Dicer, I guess, is what I should call her now. So they've been friends. I don't know, Chelsea, how long have you guys been friends? I think
almost 20 years.
Wow. I don't even know if I have any friends that I've known that long.
Wait, that's a lie. Because then I met her when I was 12. I think 15 years.
Got it. 15 years. So yeah, I've been introduced. I think I got introduced by Tracy to you at least 7, maybe 8 years ago. And when I first met Chelsea, it was one of those relationships that just sort of clicked right away. I think we had a playful energy that sort of fed off of each other that turned pretty quickly into a real, trusting sort of brother-sister relationship. She was, of course, in our wedding. And then I think one of the people that first sort of raised her hand in support of all the work that I'm doing around Student of Intention, around the 5 buckets, around just exploring myself, my relationships, my health, in different ways. And I'm just real excited to welcome you to the show, Chelsea. And also just want to take this time to thank you for all the support, both early on and consistently through doing this work on myself and trying to help others do this work as well.
Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
You got it. You got it. So with that, so the 5 buckets, again, it's a framework for living with intention, and it's a practice that I implemented back in September that I do every single week, where I name intentions across 5 areas. Those areas are relationships, creativity, health, learning, and work. And for this first episode of season 2, Chelsea and I are going to dive into her experience with the relationship bucket. And to open our conversation, I want to start by saying, most people ask me when they ask me about the 5 buckets, like, is there an order? And there absolutely is. I put relationships at the top deliberately, intentionally. In the book, I call relationships the greatest enhancers and potentially the strongest detractors in our lives, right? They provide us support. They provide us scale. And very much so, I think are also one of those things that without intention, without kind of sort of maintenance, proper nurturing, we can sort of get into a reactive state with our relationships where we're surrounded by the same people, the same ideas, the same perspectives, day in and day out. And then conversely, or on the other side of relationships, we sort of keep them at the same level. We're not really deepening them. So, all to say, I think relationships are really important, and I'm excited to talk about the relationship bucket with you. So I guess let's just open it kind of broadly here, Chelsea. How has relationships, I guess, how have you been living intentionally with regards to relationships here and now? Like what's maybe changed for you? Mm-hmm. What are you sort of nerding on when it comes to relationships? Let's open it up that way.
Yes, I would say the best place to start is probably just relationship with self. And that's something that's just been so important to me within the past, I would say, 1.5 to 2 years. And before that, when I look at myself, I did things for other people, and I really didn't invest time and nurture my own energy in that way. So for me, it's sort of creating this foundation and sort of this armor of what I need to be myself and at what degree that needs to happen in order to give other people in my life support or whatever it is they're looking for and whatever I need back from them. And a way in which I sort of do this for myself is with ritual. And I know this is something you and I have talked about, and it's something that's so important to me in developing this with myself and connecting it back to student of intention. For me, ritual is doing things with intention, right? It's practices, it's time spent with intention of a greater purpose, of whether that's connecting with myself or connecting with my dreams or connecting with the things that I'm manifesting. And also finding a way to make that feel sacred. And around all of that, it doesn't need to look like anything crazy. And I think finding beauty in ritualistic moments in the daily flow of things is how that shows up for me. So it's walking Frankie, my dog, outside and stopping at a tree and taking a couple deep breaths and just realizing like I'm here and I'm present and this is the moment that I have. Like that's a ritual that I've created in my life right now. And some other things, just waking up in the morning and creating space to write, to jot a few things down, or to take 5 deep breaths and light a candle that smells really good. And all of these things sort of fill me up and deepen my relationship with myself, even though they're super simple. It makes me feel like, okay, I've carved out time for myself, the most important person in my world. And then from there, sort of developing and understanding, like, how do I bring other people into this? And how can I support other people in my life?
100%. I think that was something I kind of noticed early on as well, as like, as I was doing the practice of naming intentions for myself, is like, I started to understand this relationship between giving giving to myself so that I can better give to others and better give to my relationships.
Right.
So I'm glad that you brought that up, right? Relationship to self is where it all begins. It's sort of foundational, to use your word. Now, you said that this sort of happened like a year ago, right? I guess, can you take me back there? Like where did that change, or what did that change sort of look like?
Yeah, I would say probably maybe a year is not enough within the past couple years. Just understanding that there was maybe some unhappiness that I was sort of pushing down, and I didn't really know where that came from. And I think a lot of that was just not listening to myself and not, finding my nature and understanding my nature instead of following culture, if that makes any sense. And
your nature instead of culture?
Yes. And, and just like feeling, and what is the essence of me as a person? How do I want to show up in the world, and what does that look like? And I think a year and a half ago, if I reflect on where I was meeting a lot of new people, a lot of people in a different community that weren't like me. They were very vulnerable and in tune with themselves, and there was no sort of small talk conversation, and that made me really uncomfortable. It's like, I don't want to drop in with you that way right now. I just want to talk about nonsense. And that was really confronting. And these people are now so important to me and are like brothers and sisters. And I think being on that journey with them and being uncomfortable in those moments made me realize, like, okay, there's so much work that I need to do. And also there's so many other people that I can learn from, that I can sort of aspire, that are doing this work on themselves. And I know you have a similar story, and people that you've met that have sort of helped you transform along this journey too.
Yeah, no, you said, I think, two really interesting pieces. So one, this idea of kind of finding yourself versus like culture, kind of what you think you should be, maybe is another way to put it. And I think my take on that is like, that's just hard. I know it's surprising that it's so hard, right? Like I'm 37 years young. Like I thought for a long time ago, like I would have figured out who I was, and I definitely was not. I definitely did not figure it out. I still haven't figured it out. Yeah. Right. I mean, if you talk to any of my friends or even my wife, right, like they're like, well, this is definitely a different guy.
Yeah.
Just over the last 6 months. Right. So I definitely recognize that. It's interesting. I don't know why that is. Like, why is it so hard to sort of just even ask the question of like, who am I? Like, what is my authentic voice? What am I, how do I really want to show up in the world? Right. Like that's certainly a journey down intention, that I don't think enough of us take. And I certainly didn't take it on early on. And then the second piece that you mentioned, and I think it's a big reason why I put relationships at the top, is, when I go back to that retreat, time and time again, people are asking me like, well, what was the aha moment? Like, what happened? And I have this, very specific moment where I was in a meditation ceremony and I was listening to this song by one of the leaders. His name was Charles. And in the song, he kept repeating this phrase, pray for guidance. I pray for guidance. And for whatever reason, in that song, like that word guidance, it definitely struck me. And it kind of sprang this catalyst of the idea of the 5 buckets. And I often reference that moment as kind of the moment. But if you like dig down deeper and you really know me and you ask me this question, I think outside of that context of like trying to force an aha moment, what I really attribute that the catalyst for this transformation, the catalyst for the 5 buckets, the catalyst for Student of Intention, are the men that I was around that weekend. Men like Ryan, men like Parker. These are mutual friends that we know. Men like Julian, men like Kenny, your fiance, and particularly in that environment, they definitely, I think to your point, they were more vulnerable than any group of men I'd ever been around. It was certainly, and I would consider myself even at that time a pretty vulnerable dude. Like I'm pretty open book, but in that setting, like to have the caliber of men and individuals there being so vulnerable, being so open,
right,
being healthy, being, working on each other, doing self-work in that space. Like that's really what did it.
Yeah.
That's really what did it. And it sounds like you kind of went through the same thing.
Yeah, the same thing. And it's so funny because like, I think maybe like 6 months later, I found myself like on work calls and I would ask, people on my team, like, how are you doing today? How are you feeling? And they would say just like an automatic answer of, I'm great. And I catch myself being like, what does great mean? Like, tell me more about how you, like, I want to learn more. And I'm like, okay, all of this is rubbing off on me. It feels really good because it's also us trying to connect in a deeper way instead of on this surface level way. So I just appreciate everything that I've learned from all of my old friends and new friends and all my new brothers and sisters.
Yeah. Yeah. So we talked a little bit about self. We talked a little bit about kind of the shift in self being exposure to new acquaintances, new relationships. So what about when we kind of figure this out, right? And I'm dealing with this myself. Like, how do we balance, or how do you balance, I should say, broadening these relationships, knowing how powerful some of these new relationships have been, with deepening relationships that you're currently involved in? What does that sort of balancing act look like for you right now?
Yeah, I think something that's really important to me is continuing to deepen the relationships that I have, to your point, and making sure that I'm giving time to nurture those. And also at the same time, protecting my energy in new relationships and making sure that I'm giving what I need and I'm receiving back what I need. And, I remember Kenny is my fiance, is amazing at cultivating relationship and meeting new people and carving out time for people. And I'd always be like, how do you have so much time and energy to do that? And he's like, well, everyone needs something from someone. We're all giving and taking. And that concept sort of stuck with me. It's like, oh, I get that. That makes sense. And when I think about the new people in my life and these new friends, it's like I'm pulling from them the same way they're pulling from me. I don't think I answered your question.
No, no, you did. In regards to, yes, it is a give and take. It is a push and pull. I guess I'm like, tactically speaking, right? And again, I go through this myself. Like, I see myself naturally drawn to some of these newer relationships in my life. And I don't know if that's necessarily the right path, but my instinct and my gut says like, hey, I just reconnected with, Kevin Winbauer for the first time in 6 years. And I've also seen him like 6 times in 7 weeks. I haven't seen dudes that are in my wedding. They were in my wedding just 2 years ago that much. Right.
Yeah.
Sean, he's another example. He was a guy that was at the retreat, and someone that we just clicked, and he happened to live in Hermosa. He was a person that I put as a relationship intention very on. Like, I want to go, I'm drawn to this man. I want to nurture this relationship. And so I've done that. And we've, now I got invited to his wedding, and, we've worked out together. We've nerded out on creativity projects together. So we've built a really solid foundation for a relationship in a different way than I've ever built with anybody else. And it just happened to be in a short amount of time. So then I take that and I compare it to, my relationships again with some of the folks that were in my wedding. And these are men that I'm going to be friends with for a long time. But it's just like, okay, So how do I figure this out? How do I balance these things? And I mean, I'm kind of just going with the flow, right?
Right.
But I'm just curious if that kind of comes up for you at all.
Yeah, it does. And I think my mindset is to not compare them because then and then I'm comparing them for no reason, and they're not the same people. When I think about, I have maybe 5 women, powerful anchors in my life for 15 plus years. those women are not going anywhere, and I would do anything for them and they would do anything for me. But it doesn't mean that they are able to support me in this new transformation and the direction I'm going. And that's okay, because I have them in a different capacity. I have them in like as sisters and as one day mothers together. And there's so much joy that's going to pull from that, that when I look at new people that I've been meeting, that I've become so close with, that I, again, talk to every day, probably more than I talk to some people from my past, it's just different, right? I can get on the same page with them about different topics, spirituality, where I'm at right now, the feelings that are coming up for me. And that's okay that they won't be connected. And, I was thinking like, for Kenny and I's wedding, all these people being in the same room is going to be the most like joyous experience, because it's like all of the worlds colliding, and I know they're all going to get along. And if they don't, like, that's okay. And I think accepting that for what it is kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, in the relationship, I mean, I really like that answer about not comparing them. I think even right now, like, I'm comparing them for the sake of comparing them, but not, so I'm glad that you answered it that way, right? Like, you just maybe think of what's also how the relationships have formed, right? So you think of the past relationships, they are formed over, maybe it's childhood memories, maybe it's, and it's over an extended period of time, right? It's over, getting each other through past, breakups or failures, right? Or opportunities, right? These sort of newer relationships are, again, built differently. They're built in short order. They've been built over, for me, like I was talking about with Sean, like we came together really well over, he was crafting a men's journal and I'm crafting, my first book. He is crafting a community for first responders. I'm, crafting a community for students of intention. And then we have our health, where we were two guys that could work out really well together. Let's just put it that way. So we had an interesting, strong bond that was forged through those sort of different medium. I'm curious for you, like how are you being intentional with these relationships? What are some of the things that have stuck out to you as like, wow, I've kind of built this relationship through this way of connecting that maybe I didn't do with, maybe I just haven't even done before?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think communication is something, the first thing that pops in my mind is communicating with these people with a purpose. And, I look at myself 5 years ago and I was like just texting 50 million people all day. And I had all these group messages and all these people that I would just talk to about nonsense. Like, oh, what are you eating for lunch? Just random stuff. Like, I don't do that anymore. Now it's, if there's something I have to share with you, I'm going to share it with you. And then we're going to create conversation around that. And I feel like that's sort of been reciprocated. When there's big things that happen in my life, I reach out and I share it with people and we get to be together over whatever happened. And I think that has been important for me, and also just protecting my social energy in that way. And just within the past year and a half, I've realized that's so important. I would, fill my weekends with all these social activities, but like, was I actually present in all of these moments? What did I get from all of this stuff other than just like a hangover or like late night food? So I think just like having purpose around when I'm communicating and why has been super important. And
where does that part come from?
Student of intention.
Come on now. Great answer. Yeah, no, I communication is again, another great answer. Like, so I want to talk about communication with our significant others. That's where I want to take this conversation. But before I do, like, I guess that's what I was asking. Like, I think that's another thing that I think back to the retreat that just like kind of blew my mind, is how folks like Ryan and Parker communicated. These are men that at first glance, you just look at them, they're like, man, these are charismatic, these are healthy, these are successful individuals in their own right. And a lot of times when you see those people, they don't have time for other people. They don't have time to communicate. They're busy with things. These dudes were never busy. They just look like if you had a conversation with them, I remember like, are you staring into my soul, bro? like, you're really listening to me, man. Like,
and they're like this close to you, and you can just like feel their breath, and you're like, they're here.
Yeah, it was really like, I remember that kind of blew me away. So when you said communication, and again, reflecting on myself, like, I was a person who was always in a hurry. Like, I think I always, I certainly have my moments where I'm really connected with someone and I'm, whatever, but not in that way. And so that was something for me where, that was another piece, right? That sort of I took from that experience and have started to be mindful with my own communication.
Yeah.
So that's where it kind of came up for me.
And then with that, do you see the way in which they were sort of receiving you and you were communicating? Do you see yourself sort of reflecting that in other relationships in your life?
As much as possible. It's definitely a learned skill, right? It's a learned behavior. It's something that I would say I didn't naturally subscribe to. Listening is the other side of that, right? It's speaking and listening, in body language, this whole makeup of communication. I think I've always been a person that sort of can feel people out pretty well. I can get the energy and understand and be empathetic. That sort of comes naturally to me, or a skill that I've built up. But the listening piece in particular, and holding space, being patient with conversations and with individuals, that's definitely not. That's something I just got to continue to work on. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think this shows up most for me at work, like in the work setting. And I remember a goal that I set at the top of the year was to actually listen when I'm in a meeting, instead of listening and then like writing an email over here and not really giving anyone my full attention. And so that's definitely something that I'm working on. Is definitely hard, especially if you have like a fast-paced job. And also within that, I've been working from home a lot. Sometimes Kenny works from home, and there's moments where he pops out of the room just to like come over and give me a hug and kisses. And my mindset during that is to just like turn my chair around and just accept and receive, instead of being like, half trying to talk to him and be like, oh, thanks for coming out here. And my day just is so much more full when I can do that, when I can show up that way in meetings, during conversations, and in those like little moments at home that I love so much too. Well,
that sounds like a nice moment. Yeah. So yeah, let's talk about, I would argue the most challenging and most impactful time for communication, and maybe even the most challenging and most impactful relationships, are our significant others. I can share a bunch on what Tracy and I are going through, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
You're the guest.
And my nails might just rise over here.
And you showed your beautiful ring.
Yes.
You are newly engaged, so congrats.
Thank you.
Any stories you want to share around you and Kenny, or the engagement, or where do you want to start?
Yes. We've had such an incredible journey, I would say. And our engagement happened, I don't know, was that a month ago? I think about a month ago. It feels so much longer. And it happened in a sound ceremony, and at the end of it, and I just wasn't expecting, and just picture this dark room with like these beautiful candles lit, and this moment that everyone is fully present for. There's no phones around. Everyone's just had this magical experience, and I'm sitting there, and he comes over to me, and he holds out his hand, and he's like, come to the front with me. And we're in this large circle. There's probably about 20 people. And I'm like, I think we should be sitting right now. Like, this is over. And he's like, no, just trust me. Come to the front with me. So I'm like, okay, go to the front with him. And it's kind of in the middle front. And there's these two cushions there and a candle. And the candle is this candle that my mother had given him for Christmas. And it was infused with sage, and just really beautiful. And something that I knew was like, oh, that's from my house. That's really cool that he has it here. And I sit there, and he looks at me, and he starts to tell me this is over his birthday weekend. So we have 22 of our amazing friends surrounding us. And he starts to tell me, thank you so much for helping me and supporting me and creating this. I couldn't have done it without you. And I'm sitting there, and I'm like, yeah, sure, like no problem. Thinking also like, what are you like? Why are you doing this in front of everybody? Not even thinking like what was coming. And then he starts to say, you know, I want to honor you for the woman that you are and for how you show up in the world and the way that you walk and the way that you care for your family, all these beautiful things. And I'm still sitting there like, okay, dude, like, thank you, thank you, thank you. And then he asks me and I just erupted into full tears and like couldn't really speak. And it was just such a beautiful moment because I wasn't expecting it at all. Like, I know that this was part of our journey, but I just didn't know it would happen so soon. And B, no one else knew except for one person, my good friend who sang right after. So it was like, everyone was kind of just like, what is going on? Like, what did he just do? And we were all, I was like just shocked with everybody. So it was beautiful. It was like, I'm not the type of person that's like sat and wondered like, oh my God, how is someone going to propose to me? I think the only thing I've ever thought is like, I wonder if he'll use Frankie, my little dog, because I love him so much. Oh my goodness. But yeah, it was a beautiful moment. And just in relationship, I learned so much just from getting engaged, which I had no idea. Just this power, and we've talked about this too, the power of commitment that comes with it. And, you know, I think about marriages in my life that I've seen, some good and some bad. And I've always questioned, you know, like, is this for me? Like, am I just doing this because everyone else is doing it? Like, what is my intention behind it? And a little side story, a couple months ago, maybe not even a couple months, like 6 months ago, Kenny and I had this intense conversation about marriage. And he kind of like flustered me, asking me why. And so that night, or within a couple of days, I like talked to my therapist and I'm like, what the F? And she's like, you should write a letter. Just write a letter to yourself. So I write this whole letter about why I want to get married, and all of these things pop up for me, like the sacredness of marriage that I can create on my own, commitment, walking with someone in life, supporting someone, what that looks and feels like. And all of that, I wrote this and I was like, yeah, like this is it. And to bring it back, it's like, I finally put intention behind it, why I wanted to do it, why it was important to me. And then so fast forward, like all this happens and I'm just like, yes, like this feels so connected and in sync with everything that I want in my life right now. And where we're at now is just this place of knowing that we have each other. Like no matter what happens, like I'm walking beside you in this life and I'm going to do everything I can to help you cultivate and create the life that you want and succeed in your way. And you're going to do the same for me. And communication is obviously at the core of that, which you could totally agree with. So it's just been this really beautiful unraveling of what it means to like truly hold someone and see someone, like truly see someone for who they are and not try and impose or change, and just realize like, this is my person and this person is going to continue to evolve over and over and over and over. And I'm going to be the pillar for him while he does that.
Giving me all the feels, Chels.
I love.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that story. Just sounds like a beautiful engagement and much better performed by Kenny than myself. I must say mine was a little bit of a fiasco. Let's stay on this point of what I really want to focus on is like, because I've seen this from afar, and I guess you're sort of validating my perception. My perception has always been like, wow, like they're really good at figuring each other out. Like they're really good at giving the space for each other to sort of figure themselves out and then consequently figure out what their relationship ultimately is going to look like. Versus I think a lot of us too, we don't do enough of that. We don't give enough space for that, but we over-index on the commitment part. We're like, you know what? I can commit to this person. I can take a big step. I can get engaged. I can get married. I can, even that first step of calling somebody, a boyfriend or girlfriend, a significant person in your life. We're quick to make that step, but we're not quick to say, okay, well, this person has this thing that annoys me or is maybe different than I would look at it. And then vice versa. Like I want to be clear with this is important to me and this is something I'm going through, and see if they're accepting of it. From afar, you seem to have navigated that piece rather well. And I've also seen you guys not totally be interested in the commitment part, or at least like the cultural norm of commitment, like getting married. Is that an accurate perspective?
Yeah, I would say that that's an accurate perspective. And I would add to that, and Kenny and I are really interested in the process after. So when I think about like relationships, like, okay, you have the title. We're both interested in everything that comes after. So when it comes to marriage, like obviously the planning of all this stuff is going to be really fun, but it's really the process after where that's when we can sort of like get our hands dirty and show up for each other and have conflict and have challenge. And it wasn't always like that for me. You know, I came from my past. It's just like, anytime something rocky happened, it was almost like, okay, I'm out. Like, this is not for me. Like, this wasn't meant to be. And he's really helped me shift that perspective. And now conflict is something that I look forward to, not all the time, but sometimes when I'm in it, I'm like, this is kind of fun. Like, this is the fun part, right?
Now you just sound crazy.
I know I sound crazy. And I think that the reason that feels safe for me is because, you know, we've had conversations where I've shared this with him like maybe a year and a half ago. Like, man, every time we fight, I feel like you want to like jam or I want to leave. Like, that's just my nature of how I was raised. And he's like, I've never thought that once. We've never gotten a conflict once where I was like, this person's not right for me. And that just was like, whoa. And I just had this like softening, like, okay, like, and then now it gets juicy, right? Because there's no like, I don't know if ultimatum's the right word, but there's no consequence. It's really just growing. So that shift has been helpful for us. And yes, like we're in a space now and like, obviously like we continue to do work and we continue to show up with our egos in certain ways. But I think we both are able to sort of ground. It's like, okay, this is not you, this is me. And that's been helpful in all these like other little techniques that we've picked up along the way and will continue to pick up too.
Yeah, you just, I don't know, you said a lot that made me think of my own self and how I still get scared sometimes where it's like, I get scared about the fact of like, can I change Tracy enough? Can I be the man that I need to be for our relationship to last, 30, 40, 50 years, however long 60 years, however long it's going to be. And that fear sort of like makes me want to, sometimes press the eject button. Like I got to get out of here. And but I'm also the thing battling that is this, this commitment. And I love commitment. I think commitment's just one of those things that makes all the magic happen. Right. So I'm constantly kind of getting tugged in both directions. It's nice to hear your perspective and that you both kind of have been aligned around that. That's really beautiful that he actually had that moment of saying like, I've actually never felt that. That would be really like sort of sobering.
Yes, sobering is like ground, like any word that's a synonym of that happened for me. And I was like, this goes against everything that I've thought. And to like the way that I've shown up in past relationships too. It's like, it gets hard. I'm like, I'm out. Like, this is too much work. I got too much other stuff going on. But now it's like, that's not an option anymore. And the option is to take a step closer and to figure it out. So, and like, I look forward to more of these great moments and we talk about it. We're like, man, like some really tough stuff is going to happen to us. And like, how are we going to deal with it? Like, what are we going to do? And I'm like, who sits and asks these questions? Like, this is so weird.
Well, you said a little bit about, that was kind of interesting. I'm curious about the, after the engagement, you talked about like this engagement, things have changed, some things have, new things have developed. You're sort of recognizing this as a big step. And now you're focused on what this commitment entails. What are like the small little things that you're doing maybe now post engagement to even kind of live the experience to the fullest?
That's a great question. I think for me in life with partner, and if you were to ask me this a year and a half ago, or when we first, 3.5 years ago, when we first moved in, I would say something completely different. I would say, well, I'll just say what I'm going to say and then I can talk about it. So I would say just little moments. And I shared this with you earlier, just pausing and giving him my presence when he asks for it. And those moments throughout the day, right? Those moments in the morning, those moments when he's working from home and he pops out of the room, or opportunities to, make him breakfast or to sit together at dinner and to connect. All of those little things feel so much more important and heavier to me now after it, just because it's like, okay, I'm setting up a cadence for how we're going to flow in this space that we're creating. That's going to be our home. Instead of previously, I would say my relationship cadence for connection was, let's have a weekend away. Like, let's get away and have this space away from our normal lives. But like, that's not reality. Reality is like, how am I going to show up when I see him, when I pass him in the kitchen? Am I going to is my day going to weigh on me? Is that energy going to feed into him? Or am I going to be able to be present in the moment and give a smile or say something that's light in this type of person that I want to be? So I think all of those little things have just become so much more important. And then for me personally, like the way that I felt after all of this is just this true feeling of of being held, just being held by somebody, and knowing that when all these other things in my life become chaotic or they don't start going right, I have someone that's my anchor beside me, and they're not going anywhere. And when all of this stuff turns to hell, that's okay. Like, that doesn't matter, because I'm still going to have someone that's going to hold me and hold me accountable. Also, like, hold me when I'm sad and depressed and upset, and when I'm happy, and all of these things. And that's more important, right? Because like, all of this stuff is going to continue to change and evolve.
Man, I hope Kenny listens to this. He's going to feel good. Tracy's probably just going to kick my butt like she always does.
She's not.
Yeah. Well, cool. Thank you for sharing all that too. And congrats again on the engagement. I'm so excited for you two. Just constantly enamored with how you two are approaching your relationship. And just, it's inspiring, for lack of a better word. It really is. So keep up the good work. I guess let's open it back up, talk about relationships more broadly with regards to what's next. Like for you on an individual level, what are you going through work-wise, creativity-wise, health-wise? How are relationships impacting these other, the other buckets?
I feel very full in my relationship bucket for the time being, for right now. And I mean, this, I've been working on well space and really leaning into my creativity bucket. And that process for me has been super important, and something that I've been focused on probably as equally as relationships. So when I'm thinking about, what's next for the upcoming weeks for me, it's giving my attention and energy back into that space that I spent so much time in before. And knowing that it's okay then when I want to take breaks from that. And I feel like you've helped me tremendously in that sense, and creating something that's unique to me. So that's something that is kind of a focus, I would say, shifting away from the relationship bucket, which is probably not what you want to hear on this podcast.
No, it's all good. No, I mean, what I'm hitting on is how relationships impact all those other things, right? Like I talked a little bit about my relationship with Sean and how, and Ryan, how they both really impacted my health. My work, right? Like the stuff that I'm doing with, take the book as a great example. I had some crazy relationships come into my life that candidly, I don't think this book gets written if I don't bump into my old friend from college, Kevin, who introduced me to a transplant from Ohio, moved to California, who'd already self-published 3 books. His name's Tom. he introduced me to him. He gave me all the confidence in the world to go out and write this book. And he introduced me to my editor, Jennifer. She was like, as soon as I met her, it was like, she was a poet. She's an editor, and she was reading Eckhart Tolle's A New Earth. And so when I tell her I'm writing a book about living with intention, she's just, and that I'm starting the first page of the book as a poem. She's just like, wow, are we not just supposed to be meeting right now?
Yeah.
And then I met my publisher through my friend Ash. Like, all these relationships have just kind of poured over into all the other areas of my life and helped me in so many ways. So, I don't know, that's just kind of been my own experience. And it's been really interesting. And, you know, Chris right here, the captain of the ship, the guy behind you, what he's teased out of me with this podcast, what we've sort of worked on together with regards to leaning on each other, with him growing his business, me growing this, you know, this community in my business. They're new relationships, but they're just so pivotal. They're so important.
Right. Yeah. And I would, just to touch on that and to, I think, now answer your question, I think all of these, like the relationship with self, for example, has been so important to me, as I've already shared. And that has given me confidence to create this thing that I've wanted to create, my little love child. And also the relationships that I have set in my life have also given me, to your point, support to create this thing that I've been wanting to create, and sort of like ushering me forward, like, just do it, just do it. And so that's been really beautiful and a great journey for me, because it's something that I never thought I would do. And I think, a little tangent, but I know you're reading Big Magic right now by Elizabeth Gilbert. And I read that before I created Wellspace. And I loved the concept of these ideas dropping into people. And then if you grab it and you catch it, great, you do it. If you can't, it goes on to someone else. And I think in the wellness space, I'm like, okay, well, she dropped like a ton of ideas everywhere, but that was sort of like the catalyst for creating this. And then because I had all these relationships and all of this support around me from my partner, from all of my friends, it gave me confidence to create this and to know that no matter what happens with it, like, I went through the process of doing it, and that's a win right there. And whatever happens next is going to continue to be more wins. So I would say my relationships have fed into these other things that I get to birth in my life.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And you actually just reminded me of relationships with authors, like, or heroes, mentors, whatever you want to call these people. Like, that's another relationship that, kind of spans time. It spans, you know, like direct connection. It's through their words, and it's, you know, Stephen Pressfield, if you ever listen to this, like, you are my dog, bro. I feel more connected to that man just through reading, you know, his, I think at least 4 of his books. Elizabeth, right? Like, she's right there. She's basically, I just feel like she's like my personal cheerleader every time I read that book.
Liz.
You know, these are important relationships to have too, because they basically create this sort of internal champions that you can kind of draw on, these internal coaches, these internal, you know, gypsies or fortune tellers, right? So those are another relationships that I think are important to foster, establish, whatever.
Yeah, I got another story for you.
Tell me, what is it?
Kind of touching on this idea of mentors. So and you know this as well. So what was it, about a month ago? My dream job, like, came into my email inbox, and it was for this role that I was like, I've been prepping for this. Like, this is my moment, like, to get in the ring. And at the time I was like, I'm totally going to get this job. Like, how could I not? Step 1 is to get my name across this woman's inbox, and then I got to take it from there. But to do that, like, I didn't have any connections at this company. So I had to reach out to mentors and people in my life that I really look up to and sort of be like, can you help me with this? And they showed up right away, immediately, no questions asked. And then in addition to that, I'm like, okay, so she emails me and she's like, I've had 2 people talk about you, and that's a good sign. Like, I'd love to connect with you. So I end up getting on the phone with her. We have a great conversation. When I hung up, it felt like maybe it wasn't as right as I thought, just because it was pretty short. We ran out of time, and I was just thinking, if this woman is going to pick me based upon that conversation, if I was her, I'd have like a million more questions. But I was sort of hopeful. And in between that waiting time, I reached out to more people in my life, and I was like, can you please write me a letter? And I haven't done that in so long. Like, I think we did that when we went to college, right?
Right.
Or when I was in grad school. So it was kind of like, oh, do you mind? And also like, I needed it in 3 days because I wanted to send it to her while she was still going through her decision process. So all of these people were like, of course, no problem. Like, I'll get this to you. So I had 3 amazing people in my life provide me letters. I had 2 people in my life send an email and show it for me. 1 person that was like, hey, let's work on like interviewing skills. Cause I was like, I haven't interviewed in so long. And fast forward, I didn't get the job, which you know about. And then I ended up giving it to someone internally, which is the best case scenario. And you can't argue with that. But my learning, like a big learning I took from that, was all of these people and these relationships in my life that showed up for me when I needed them. And like, I shed tears over that. Every time I got a letter, like I shed a tear because I was like, what? Like, this is so crazy. And it was so powerful to not only ask for something from these people I love so much, and also to receive that. And it's just a moment that I'll never forget, because I don't know if I'll call on these people in that way again, but it was really powerful to experience that.
Dude, that's awesome. And I knew about the opportunity, and that you didn't get the opportunity. I didn't know that you had such a crew there helping you out that you called on. And that's just awesome. And to go through that experience, right? Like you do know that it's there now, right? And you're going to be there for those people as well. And I think that's a really important piece of relationships too, that I know I don't talk about enough. Like we talked at the very beginning, we talked about, having to take care of ourselves and be in good relationship with ourselves so that we can be in service to others. And service is definitely, I think, what it all comes back to, and what we talk about, sort of our opportunity is to be in service of others, but we don't talk about asking for help enough, right? We don't talk about that. You know what? There's the other side of this coin is when you want your people to come help and come to your aid, like they're going to be there for you because you've showed up to them, you've nurtured those relationships, and that, even though you didn't get the job, that's a wonderful experience and a great story of asking for help.
Yes. I'll never forget that.
Cool. Well, this has been fun, Chels. I mean, this is season 2 again. This is the first episode. We're tackling the relationship bucket. Chels is part of the Student of Intention community. And, one of the big things, I think, not just for this season, but for moving forward, is I want to be able to bring this platform to the community, allow the community to interact with the guests of the show, to, experience a podcast. I think this is your first time doing this, right? Yeah. So I hope we did just that. Is there any questions or anything else that you want to share before we get going?
I don't think so. Yes, I think so. Just thank you. Thank you for this work that you're doing on yourself. And thank you for being a part of my life and supporting me. And like you said, being a brother to me, and being an incredible partner to my sister, Tracy. So I love you.
I love you too. Thank you. Anybody listening, if you haven't done so, please subscribe. Student of Intention is www.studentofintention.com. Like I said at the beginning, the book is due out in a couple weeks. The 5 Buckets, a framework for living with intention. So you get all your announcements there. And I guess, how do people get in touch with you, Chels?
Can I remember my Instagram handle?
Come on.
On Instagram, I just changed the name. It's Chelsea.Bosley, Chelsea with a CA. You can reach me there to chat. I love good conversations. And you can't answer with, I'm doing great.
And check out your new health coaching
Yes.
practice platform. What do you want to call it?
Yes, please. I call it a space. So it's called Well Space. You can find it wellspaceco.com. And it's, like I said, this love child that I've birthed that sort of shares everything, wellness, about balance, about nurturing, really about looking inward and understanding how we're feeding our bodies, not just with the food in our mouth, but with the things that we see, with relationships, creativity, all of the buckets, of course. So yeah, it's really exciting. It's sort of starting right now and taking off. So I'd love support on that as well.
There you have it. Thanks again, Chelsea. I love you too.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Bobby. Thanks for listening to today's show. For more, follow Student of Intention at www.studentofintention.com. And remember, don't wait, start small, learn as you go.